All right, what's going on, guys? Simple Sports back, another episode I believe 64. I can't believe I've recorded this many times. Um, so a lot to unpack. First round of the series or first round of the NBA playoffs are over. All of the first round series are over, and the winners have been decided. Some of the second round series have already started. Some have yet to commence. Some will start tonight. So a lot to unpack after the first round is over and done with. A couple of things I want to touch on really quickly as we go into the second round and headed towards the end of the season. So let's start with the Cavaliers. Obviously, congrats to the Cavs first of all, moving on past the Pacers. Congrats on LeBron's teammates finally showing up when it was very much needed, and obviously a great game by LeBron James, no doubt about that. But a couple of things I want to touch on with this, because as a fan who at least tries to be unbiased, one of the things that really bothers me is when people twist and turn numbers and stats and narratives and storylines and moments just to support what they believe. And, you know, it's fine. Like, that's just the way sports are. There will never be a resolution to that. I'm not delusional to think that somehow we'll all come to peace in terms of being on one side of the argument or the other. But there is this narrative that LeBron's team just isn't good enough and doesn't show up in big moments, and his teammates aren't good enough and he carries the team and yada, yada, yada. Okay. First of all, it's a false narrative, okay? And it's a lie, quite frankly. But before you all freak out, allow me to explain, okay? First thing I want to say is, of course, LeBron James is obviously the best player on his team. Obviously, the best player in the East, at least I believe so, and arguably the best player in the NBA. I personally would take Kevin Durant, but that is more of a long-term solution than it is an all-encompassing solution. I do believe LeBron James is the all-around better player over his career, obviously, but if you're talking about right now, say for the next 5 years, give me Kevin Durant, not LeBron James. It's hard for me to believe that he's going to keep this up for 5-6 more years. It's not possible. The Tom Brady thing was a little unprecedented as well, but I have more confidence in Tom Brady given the position and the nature of the sport and the position that he plays. There's not a lot of physical taxation on the body other than when you get hit, and so it's a lot dependent on the team as well as much as it is the individual. Whereas in basketball, it's pretty straightforward. You're running up and down the court, you're getting fouled, you're playing defense. It's a little more consistent taxing on the body, whereas being a quarterback in football who's a traditional pocket passer, doesn't run, doesn't get hit a whole lot, gets down, and also has a solid offensive line. It's a little bit different in terms of the age thing, but nonetheless, and he's not running and jumping and things of that nature. He's pretty stagnant in the pocket. So that's my thought on that. But let's get to the main point, and let's walk through this. So the Cavs and LeBron jumped out into a huge lead in Game 7, much like they have in a lot of the games this year, not only in the playoffs, but the regular season as well. And they gave up the lead again, as they have numerous times this year as well. The Pacers fought back, and with about a minute left in the third quarter, they were down 3 to the Cavs as LeBron James left the game with reported cramping problems. I haven't read or heard anything any different as to this point, nor have I necessarily looked, but I just assume it is what it is. People cramp up, Skip Bayless made this deal today about it being something maybe different. I don't know. I'll take it as cramping. If it is something different, then whatever. And so to that point, really no one other than LeBron had done anything, not only for the game, but largely for the series as well. And yet somehow magically when LeBron returned to the game with about 8 minutes to go in the fourth quarter, so roughly about 5 minutes of basketball time, which is a lot, okay? 5 minutes in reality is not a long time, but in basketball time, it's quite a while. 20, maybe 30 minutes, depending on stoppages and things of that nature. So let's call it half an hour. LeBron James is gone, and somehow the Cavs increased their lead to 12, led by Kevin Love and George Hill. And LeBron James was quite literally nowhere to be found. He was in the locker room. He wasn't on the court. It wasn't like he was on the bench. It wasn't like he was just disengaged from the game. He was literally not in the game for a 5-minute stretch, give or take. I don't know the exact times, but whatever. And my thing is, I didn't think he had help. And at that point in the game, I legitimately thought his legacy went from unbothered, untainted whatsoever, in as far as this year's goes and the series goes, to it was literally teetering on the line like that. He left the game with them up a point or two and came back and they were down 12, or they were up 12, where it could have easily been the opposite direction, which should have been. And that's on the Pacers. That's on Oladipo. And the Pacers organization not taking advantage of it. I mean, you have the door wide open to take this thing down and take the King down, take the Cavs out, and move on to the next round. And they had that opportunity multiple times. And I said this in my last video. When you have them down, when you have your opponent down, especially in the playoffs and elimination games and things like that, you have to step on their throat. You have to close the deal. And they didn't. And he was gone for 5 minutes. The Pacers had a chance to close the deal and didn't. And it's I don't know. That's on them. I give credit to the Cavs for taking advantage of it, but that's on them. My point is this. I'm not saying LeBron didn't carry the team. Of course he did. But this idea that he has no help, to me, that's an excuse for him potentially not making or winning the finals. And I think it's bogus. You can't use situations and things like this to elevate someone's legacy if in the same breath it can't hurt their legacy. And what I mean is, you can't say, well, he carried the team, and yet in the most important moment of the series wasn't even in the game. Forget everything that happens from game 1 through game 7's first half. At that point in the third quarter, into that point in the fourth quarter when he was missing, it is the most critical moment of the game because they are up to. LeBron James goes to the locker room, and the game, the series, the season is on the table for the taking. And his team showed up. When they needed to most, they showed up. And, it reminds me of Kobe and how people would say, well, he never passed the ball. But then they don't give him credit for his titles, and they say, oh, well, he had great teammates. It can't be both ways. You can't say, well, he never passed the ball, he was selfish, and then he went on to win 5 titles, but then say, oh, well, he had great teammates. Well, if he wasn't using those teammates, what does it matter? That logical progression doesn't make sense to me. I don't know. All I'm asking is you guys be real with yourselves, okay? Am I saying LeBron's team is great? By no means, no. But to sit here and act as if A, he doesn't have any help, and B, is not of his own doing is bogus to me. So I just want to get that out there about the Cavs. Let's move on to the Thunder and Russell Westbrook. So they're obviously eliminated from the playoffs at the hands of the Jazz. Big props to the Jazz, obviously. So I have an issue with Russ and the Thunder. First of all, they were a huge disappointment. I don't think anyone has any belief other than that. I have an issue with Russ, and I love Russ. I've always said I love Russ. I made a video not that long ago comparing Russ to Kobe in a lot of ways and a couple other different players. But I have an issue with Russ. He's become extremely painful to watch, and I've said this before. He makes some pretty poor decisions at times with the basketball. He's a freak athlete. He's a freak player. Sometimes he just doesn't make the best decisions, okay? So I'm gonna go through a couple of things really quick and just talk about what happened, what I think needs to happen. So here's a couple of numbers: 7, 8, 14, and 13. Okay, those are the number of shots by Russ per quarter in that elimination game versus the Jazz. Okay, Carmelo Anthony took 4, 2, 1, and 0. That's by quarter. Just, I don't know if I made that clear. By quarter. And Paul George took 6, 3, 2, and 4. Now, Melo and Paul George, I know they haven't shot the ball well all series, but I would also argue that, and I'd imagine for any basketball player, it'd be really difficult to get into any kind of rhythm when your offense is essentially pick and roll, dribble by Russell Westbrook, and 2 or 3 seconds left on the shot clock. Either give the ball up to a shooter or Steven Adams, drop it off, or just shoot it. And the person that is in control of that is Russell Westbrook. Now, I don't know what their offensive scheme is in terms of coaching, but their execution, from what I saw, that's what it looks like for the most part. I mean, obviously there's set plays and things like that in there, but it's not what fits them, okay? And so the person that is in control of all that is Russell Westbrook, who in that game shot the ball 43 times, who took also 19 threes, who is 31% for 3 for his career, and is 30% this year, with it dipping awfully lower than that at times, and in certain games he was awful. No one can deny the talent of Russell Westbrook. It is unquestionable. It is undeniable. And I am no basketball player. I am no basketball expert. I am no basketball coach, although I did coach a youth league once, but that doesn't count. I barely know enough about basketball, but I know enough to know that those weren't the best decisions. And it's why KD left. It's why Harden, not necessarily why he left, but why he is thriving. It's why Oladipo is getting better, and why ultimately Paul George will leave and probably do better elsewhere. Do I think Paul George is some savior for whoever he may end up with? No, and not really. But I certainly believe Russ puts a ceiling on how good some of these players can be, and I think it was really evident in that game. They took 93 shots as a team, and 43 were from Russell Westbrook, and he had 45 points or 46 points. He was, I want to say, something like 18 for 43. Like, it's just, I don't even know, other than Kobe's game, his final game, I don't know the last time I've seen someone take even 30, 35 shots, much less 43, from someone who's not a good listen, now, here's what I'll say. If Russ took 43 shots and 40 of them were him getting to the bucket, listen, I'll live with that. I'll put him on my team all day, every day. He took 19 threes. Half of them were threes almost. 19 threes. He's not a three-point shooter. He airballed like 2 or 3 of them. He's a 30% three-point shooter. I don't believe that is a winning formula, and Russ has to get that in control. The reason, and Colin, I was listening to The Herd today. Colin made a really great point. It's like at some point you have got to develop some sense of self-awareness, and I think that's where him and Kobe part ways. Kobe was very similar to Russ in that he felt he could do it. He wanted to be the reason the Lakers won, and he wanted to be the lead guy. But the difference between Kobe and Russ, and Kobe and a lot of these similar players that are just volume shooters, Kobe did develop at least a little bit of self-awareness. For example, Colin ripped him in his Game 7 performance against the Celtics in that finals game. Here's the thing I'll say about Kobe. First of all, you can say what you want about his shooting performance. At the end of the game, when it came time to it, he made a couple of big shots. He hit a couple of free throws that were huge. I think he hit 1 or 2 jumpers in, mid-range jumpers that were huge. He also gave up the biggest shot of the game to Ron Artest, now Metta World Peace. He has some self-awareness, and he knows that he needs, even if it's minimal help, he needs some help in order to win games, win championships. And Russ, that's the only thing that he is missing, is some semblance of self-awareness. And he just lacks it. And maybe it's just a part of him being stubborn and things of that nature. I know I'm the same way. I think I can do everything, and sometimes I'm reluctant to accept help either. But I also get to a certain point where I'm like, you know what? It's probably best that someone either steps in or at least helps out a little bit. And I don't think he's realized that. He very well may never realize that. And I don't think that's why he'll ever win a championship. If he doesn't change that, I don't think he will. The last thing I want to talk about are the Warriors. There really isn't much to be said here, I don't think. As I've been saying it all year, I don't think anyone can even sniff Golden State. The playoffs is about firepower and coaching. and they have both, and certainly a lot more firepower across the board than anyone else in the playoffs. And they make the most out of their firepower within the system that they play in. They pass the ball, they move the ball, and Houston has a lot of firepower too. But at the end of the day, that standing at the top of the key, dribble, step back, shoot a three is only going to take you so far. Because you're going to need there's going to be a point where you're playing the Warriors and they go on a run, you're going to need to be able to counter that in a way. And I don't think running with them is going to be the option. And the Rockets play at a slower pace because of that ISO basketball, and they have two great point guards. But when has that ever worked? Kobe, I think, was the last guy who people considered a ball hog, ball dominant person who was essentially on the team as the only superstar that won a title. LeBron James is ball dominant, but he wasn't the only superstar on either of those teams. He wasn't the only superstar on the Heat. He wasn't the only superstar on the Cavs. And so my point is that style has never really worked. Before that, it was Allen Iverson, but he didn't win a title. Every team other than that, including the Lakers, ran some sort of a system. They ran the triangle offense, and you can say what you want about Kobe being ball dominant, but he played within that system. Now, he went outside of that system at times to get buckets that were very necessary, but he didn't do that for the entire game. And when I watched the Rockets, and similarly when I watched the Thunder, they're very similar in terms of as far as what they do, at least the way it looks. I don't want to say that's what they actually do because the actual scheme may certainly be different. But the way it appears to me is pick and roll, pass it to the open shooter, or take it to the bucket, drop it off for someone else for a dunk, go back the other way, play defense. I don't know how that beats the Warriors. The ball moves. I think that's why Cleveland had so many problems last year. If you watch the one game that they won, although they shot the ball out, they had a miracle shooting night, but the ball didn't stick. The ball just didn't stick, and I don't know. I just don't see that beating the Warriors. I don't think anyone else is close. I think it's done and dusted for the title this year. Let's hang them up and bring it back next year. I don't know. That's my take. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about the draft a little bit now that that's all settled. Who I think made some mistakes, who I think improved the most, how I think my Titans did, and so forth and so on. So I'll see you guys in that episode. Until then, peace.